same points, I would imagine, because we are all talking about Yud Shvat. That Yud Shvat first is the yahrzeit of the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchok Schneerson, and then the present Rebbe, his son-in-law, taking over the leadership officially 1 year later. So we can talk about the previous Rebbe. But if I have to describe the previous Rebbe in one word or two words, I would say Mesiras Nefesh, that the previous Rebbe represented self-sacrifice, absolute self-sacrifice. And it's interesting because in the last Maimer, in his last Hasidic discourse, when he speaks about Basi Lagani, of what our mission and our purpose and what our role in the world is, he refers to us as Tzivos Hashem, the army of Hashem. That Hashem, God, refers to us with different names. Sometimes we are children, sometimes we are servants, and other times we are considered his army. What is the difference? The child performs with love. The child does and fulfills his parents' wishes as an act of love, dedication, and devotion. A servant is more out of fear, awe. A soldier is something totally different. A soldier serves with absolute self-sacrifice. It's not interested in understanding why. The general says march, and the soldier marches. That's how the previous Rebbe lived his life. That the previous Rebbe took on Soviet Russia, communist Russia, single-handedly and prevailed. Very few people took on an empire as powerful, as evil as the communists and survived. But the previous Rebbe gathered his followers when communists came to power, and their goal was to eradicate Judaism and all religion, especially Judaism, because Judaism was an absolute contradiction to their world view and world philosophy. For them, God was Mother Russia, and you couldn't believe in anything that you cannot perceive or you cannot touch, you cannot feel or smell. So they wanted to eradicate all of Judaism because Judaism demanded loyalty to a higher cause, to God and to Torah. And the previous Rebbe gathered his followers, specifically he gathered 10 followers, and they made an agreement, they made a pact together that they will do whatever it takes to guarantee the survival of Judaism, that they will fight the communists, that under their nose they will continue to teach and preach and to pray. They will establish schools of higher learning and mikvahs for women to preserve the family, the Jewish family, and that they will have schools, underground schools teaching children, and so on and so forth. And each one of them did whatever was necessary, even if it meant losing their lives. And many of these 10 original followers did lose their life. They were killed by the communist Russia, by the communist regime. The previous Rabbi himself was arrested for the crime of spreading Judaism and not abandoning his faith in Torah and buying into the communist philosophy. And he was eventually arrested. And the sentence was a death sentence, that he was going to be put to death because of his crimes against Russia. During the interrogation, they interrogated the previous Rebbe. It was a very difficult interrogation. He was mistreated and he was abused and tortured in prison, but yet he didn't change, he didn't give up. And there's a wonderful book if you want to read it, and I think it's called In Defiance, of the previous Rebbe's arrest and his liberation and how he took on the communist Russia. But one of the stories there was that they asked the Rebbe to reveal and to divulge the names of all of his followers that he sent around the Soviet Union who are building schools and establishing and supporting the Jewish infrastructure. And of course, he wouldn't give up the life of any Jew, especially his followers that were working on behalf of the Jewish community. And as much as they tortured him, he wouldn't give up any of the names. Finally, it was a Jew who took a pistol, took a gun, and pointed at the Rebbe's head, and he said, "You see this toy? This toy made many strong people talk. Even stronger people than you spoke and divulged all of the secrets." So the previous Rebbe looked at them and he says, "Let me tell you who speaks because of this toy." someone who believes in many gods and one world will talk. But I who believe in two worlds and one God, I am not going to talk because of this little pistol. Meaning that if somebody believes in many gods, whatever the gods may be, and in one world is going to talk because they value their life, they don't want to give up the life in this world, because after they die, what's the future? So therefore they will talk, they will want to do whatever it takes to stay alive. How about the Rebbe who says, I believe in two worlds and one God? And I know if you're going to take my physical life, my true life, my spirit will continue. It will continue in the world to come. My legacy will continue. What I stand for, what I fought for, that will not end with this bullet. Therefore, I will not talk. And of course he didn't. And with the help of the American government and other international powers, eventually the previous Rebbe was released. First, they changed the sentence from death to hard work in Siberia, that he was going to be sent for the rest of his life in Siberia, and then eventually he was totally freed. But on the train station going up to Russia, going up to Siberia, and many of his followers were there, and he said something which was very powerful, which I think is consistent with what he told his interrogators and investigators. He says that you should know that the nations of the world, our enemies, can only control, they can only hurt, they can only damage our physical bodies, but they cannot touch our spirit and our soul. That we have absolute freedom to live according to the wishes of Torah, the wishes of God, as expressed and powered by our soul. The nations of the world, yes, they can injure us, they can hurt us, but that is only our body. Our true nature, our true being, our true existence, which is the soul, that the nations of the world can never touch. And therefore, he showed absolutely no fear. Even when they tortured him, he wouldn't break. Why? Because he understood that what's more important is our soul and our spirit. Now, if you ever saw any pictures of the previous Rebbe when he came to the United States in 1940, it was very interesting. When he came in 1929, the previous Rebbe was strong, vigorous, potent man. He walked upright with full confidence. When he came in 1940, they had to wheel him off the boat in a wheelchair. They physically broke him. But his first words were, America is no different. That many of his Jewish friends and followers and supporters that were instrumental in bringing him to the United States told him, listen, Rebbe, there is a Judaism of the old country. There's the Judaism of Russia, of Poland. But here in America, the Golden Medina, the nation that is paved with the American dream, here, your brand of Judaism is not going to take off. So yes, we did whatever we can to save you, to spare you from the harsh realities of communist Russia. However, when you come to the United States, you should know that here it's a whole different reality, a whole different world. The first words that the previous Rebbe said, I came here to tell you all that America is no different. We're going to now transplant the Judaism of Europe here in the United States. So in body, he was broken. He couldn't walk with his own steam. And the Rebbe suffered a stroke a few years later that made it unable for him to speak. However, his spirit didn't change. So the previous Rebbe represents, to me at least, Mesiras Nefesh, this absolute devotion and dedication to Judaism that the Rebbe preached in his Maimer, in his last Maimer, which is considered the last will and testament, that in order to prevail in God's war, in the holy war, meaning of transforming this world and turning it into a godly place, into a holy place, we need to act as soldiers. Soldiers must have Mesiras Nefesh, absolute self-sacrifice, dedication, devotion to the cause that is greater than you. And it is only that way that we can guarantee the survival and the continuation of Judaism. And that's what the previous Rebbe represented. Now I have 4 minutes left to talk about the Rebbe. The Rebbe, in one word to me, is empowerment. That's how I would describe the Rebbe to me. What did the Rebbe mean to me? Empowerment. Now let me explain. I can sit here and talk to you about the Rebbe's greatness in learning and scholarship. I can talk about the Rebbe's great piety. I can talk about the Rebbe's devotion to God. I can sit and talk about the thousands of miracles that the Rebbe has performed on behalf of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. However, what are we going to take from it? The Rebbe is great, and we know of the Rebbe's greatness. However, if I tell you stories of miracles, we might all be impressed, but I cannot perform a miracle, and I'm not sure if any of you can, but I doubt that many of us can perform miracles in the category of the Rebbe. So what do I like to focus on? I like to focus on the teachings of the Rebbe that we could incorporate in our own life. That the Rebbe believed in humanity, that the Rebbe believed in our infinite ability and our divine power to make a difference and to change the world. The Rebbe believed in every single human being that he met and in their power to make a positive difference in their own life and in the life of the people around them. And I'll tell you one story, that I met this person personally. He lived in Curacao. I met him in Curacao because I was a rabbinic student in Caracas for 2 years. So you know what they say, there's two ways that you can get to see the world for free. You can join the Marines or you can join Chabad. I chose to join Chabad because it's a lot safer and they don't shoot at you. Maybe verbal assaults, but there's no bullets. So I joined Chabad. Part of my training, I studied 2 years in Venezuela. Part of our experience in Venezuela, we went to visit the outlying Jewish communities in Curacao. It was about a 3/4 of an hour flight from Venezuela. I also got to spend Purim in Aruba. How many people do you know get to go to Aruba for free? But I was in Aruba too for Purim. So I met this Mr. Grossbaum in Curacao. He had a child, and the Jewish education was non-existent in Curacao, so he decided to move to Venezuela. Before he moved, he wrote to the Rebbe to ask the Rebbe what should he do. And he wrote his letter with his question, should I stay in Curacao? The Jewish community is dwindling, although it has the oldest synagogue in this hemisphere. It's the oldest existing synagogue in this hemisphere. So he wrote the Rebbe, and then he signed his name from a little Jew in Curacao. Now, he was biologically and physically, he was very short. So he wrote to the Rebbe from a small Jew in Curacao. And he got an answer back to the Rebbe, advising him and guiding him what to do. And then in the Rebbe's handwriting, at the bottom of the letter, the Rebbe says, I would like you to know that no Jew is small. There's no such a thing as a small Jew. Every single Jew is a giant. God refers to our nation as a nation of righteous people, that we will do whatever it takes to inherit the land to bring about the coming of Mashiach. And that's how the Rebbe approached each and every single Jew. The Rebbe saw only giants. Everybody was a giant in their own way. And we can all make a big giant of a difference if we only believe in ourselves. So to summarize, the previous Rebbe represents self-sacrifice. And to me, the Rebbe represents empowerment. And this is what the 10th of Shvat is a day all about, that we reflect upon the life of the previous Rebbe and the wishes of the Rebbe and incorporate them in our lives, that with self-sacrifice, we should believe in our ability to make a difference in the world and change the world for the better. Let us roll up our sleeves and make this difference. L'chaim.
Yeshua Koach.
Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi. You're very inspiring. Very inspiring.
Amen.
You see, I know exactly
I
when
was
to
in.
stop. One more minute, I would have lost all my credibility.
I doubt it.